This time I am repairing the last few disasters on the Resto Rescue Road Runner, and all I've got to say is this: 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Actually, it is. Watch this, it's a mess. This is my 1972 Plymouth Road Runner. You've seen it on the channel before. It's got a 440 in it, a pistol grip 4-speed, gear vendors overdrive, 8 3/4 rear end, 355 gears, and fresh chestnut paint. It's actually a really good car, but it has some major stuff wrong with it, and it is no one's fault other than my own. But I'm gonna fix it all in this episode. Let me tell you all about it as I head for home. I got this car right around Christmas time in 2022, and it was a story where I bought it from a guy whose dad had passed away, and he had been restoring the car. He gave it a really good, completely thorough repaint in the original color, spiffed up the interior. All of that's way nicer than my average. He put a 440 in it. It's a factory 400 car, and it's a 1975 block. Reportedly, it came out of a Ram Charger. That may be true. And supposedly it was freshened and spiffed up, and I have a cam card where they put a little cam in it. But when I tried to drive the thing away and go home doing a standard rescue with the car, it had the worst oil pan leak I have ever seen. I mean, gushing out of the back of the pan. To fix that, I decided to pull the engine out of the car, and when I did, I found out that every nut and bolt on the whole thing was finger tight. I mean, it was absurd. But I discovered the reason. It turned out that they had put on aftermarket flywheel with removable weights, and this is an externally balanced 440 because it's a cast crank 1975 engine, and they had the weight in the wrong place on the flywheel, so the thing shook bad and rattled all the bolts loose. So I did the standard spray can rebuild, cleaned it all up, made it look good, and I thought that I had fixed the oil pan leak because the oil pan bolts were literally falling out. But then I got the car all back together, and it still has a massive leak at the back. It's not the same massive leak. Now it is obviously the rear main seal and not the oil pan gasket itself. Now on top of that, it's got an exhaust leak, which maybe you can kind of hear. It gets a little better as the car warms up, but I can't stand it. It's in a left-hand exhaust donut, so I want to fix that. And I'm pretty sure you can hear this squealing sound. Yeah, I'm an absolute idiot because I got caught up in shooting video and I was working on the car like one day a month over the period of years. I got all kinds of excuses, but the bottom line is I forgot to change the throwout bearing, and I did put a brand new clutch in it and everything else. So that was moronic. So in this episode, my challenge is to attempt to fix the oil leak and fix the exhaust leak, and if I get that far, do something about the throwout bearing. Now the big challenge here is deciding how I'm gonna do it. Am I gonna pull the whole engine out again, because that would let me get at the exhaust and the throwout bearing and the oil pan gasket, or am I gonna lie underneath the thing, pull off the oil pan and try and change the rear main seal or fix it from underneath the car? And if I do that, then I will end up pulling the transmission back to change the throwout bearing. So I've got options. Let me get home and I'll show you what I'm gonna do. The first thing I'm gonna have to do is dig into this oil leak. It is so bad, drooling all over the backside of the oil pan lip and splashing back onto the transmission and dripping everywhere. It's probably kicking oil up into the bell housing and destroying the clutch. I'll have to jack it up and find out. Here's some stuff I've already looked at. First of all, when the engine was out, I snugged all of the core plugs or threaded plugs, pipe plugs on the back of the block, so I don't think that it's that. I don't think that it's the cam core. I don't think it's the oil pan gasket, but we'll take a careful look at that. It's not the back of the valve covers, I felt in there, and it's not the oil pressure port that's sort of at the top of the block near the bell housing flange on a big block Mopar. So that's all the stuff it's not. Let me jack it up and find out what it is. Here I am underneath the car, and I admit this is the first time that I've done this since that moment of absolute anguish at the end of the last Road Runner episode. So I really have not looked into this thoroughly at all. And what I'm seeing is I've got no oil on the back of the clutch. I've got no oil on the front of the flywheel. That's actually a really good sign. How about here in the block under the rear main seal? Yes, that is wet. But it's kind of splash wet. Most of the wetness is over here on the passenger side of the engine. Is it up here? Of course, what I'm doing right now is looking at the witness marks of where the oil is dripping and sort of doing a Sherlock, trying to figure out, well, if it's dry here, then it's not coming from there. Just sort of working through the process of what it could be. It is leaked all over my driveway, and I did lay under this for a moment and wipe it all off my transmission when I got here, so I did lose that clue. But it's running down the bell housing, and it's all wet right here. And it's bone dry. Well, it's not bone dry, but it's not as wet over here. It's really good news that it's not on the flywheel. Maybe I need to recheck this passenger side valve cover. Is it wet up here? Slightly. I'll be so happy if this is something other than the rear main seal. So here's a clue. Remember I was telling you it's not the valve cover? I based that on reaching behind the valve cover and just feeling the back of the cylinder head, but I'm seeing all this wetness here on the right-hand side. I thought maybe it is the valve cover, but if I reach higher on the block, I'm not getting any wet oil. And so logically, it's not dripping down from above. It is coming from right in here. Okay, I'm gonna be back with a 1/2 inch on a 3/8 drive with an extension and a flashlight. Let's see. That's pretty snug. That's a little not snug. That's snug. It's just a bit not snug. All right, these have loosened a little bit. That would be fantastic. I generally don't ramrod a oil pan bolt if I don't have to. I don't like how tight I am cinching these, actually. Ooh, that one was pretty loose. Ah, my flashlight just rolled away. Ah. Okay, oil is getting flung up in there. Starter's got oil on it. I've investigated as much as I can here. I've gone through now and wiped off all of the residue from oil so that I can go start it while it's still on jack stands, and probably use the GoPro right there in order to look and see where the oil might be coming from. With it running, I'm trying to see what's going on. I think I see it getting a little wet right by the gasket here. Right in there. I cinched up that oil pan way more than I normally do. Does have 2 gaskets and a windage tray sandwiched in it, but normally I don't ramrod them. This time I did. The crazy thing here is it doesn't seem to be leaking. I had the thing running up on jack stands and I couldn't find the leak. The only thing that changed is that I ramrodded the oil pan bolts with a long 3/8 ratchet, way tighter than I'm normally comfortable with. Maybe that was the demon tweak. The only thing else I can think of that's different is that the car's up in the air instead of on the ground. So I'm gonna set it on the ground and try it again. Looks like it is just the corner of the oil pan there. I've reduced the leak like crazy, but it's still dripping an annoying amount. Okay, I hate to cinch it more, but I'm gonna, well, these Mylodon oil pan gaskets are called crush proof. I hope it's true because man, it's ramrodded. But I'm encouraged that it doesn't seem to be the rear main seal. Here's a wrap up on the oil leak situation. I made it way better just by ramrodding those bolts down. I did split the gasket a little bit in the corner, but it's not leaking from that corner, and that makes me happy. However, I still do have a fairly steady little drip. Here's where it's coming from. The Big Black Mopar has a rear main seal retainer made of aluminum. It carries the seal, and it also has some vertical seals that sort of keep oil from leaking between it and the block. Or they don't, and that's what's going on here. Seems to be that it's dripping down that vertical seal and just turning into a little bit of a puddle at the bottom of the pan. But I'm not gonna deal with that right now because that means dropping the pan, pulling the retainer out, and hoping that I don't make the whole situation worse, which is a real probability given my track record on this particular car. And so I'm gonna call that good. But here's some insane thinking. This thing makes a ridiculous amount of oil pressure. You look at the gauge when you fire it up cold, it goes all the way to the pin, past 80. I have seen Big Block Chryslers easily get 120 PSI when they're cold at idle. And when you rev the thing up, it is over 80 pounds all the time that you're driving the car. Now I noticed that when it's sitting and idling, it doesn't leak. When I rev it up, it does leak. So this is probably not a real thing, but I'm wondering, could all of that pressure be splashing oil in a place that's making this leak worse? Exacerbating it, if you want to use a big word? Probably not, but I'm gonna change to a thinner oil anyway. I have got Valvoline 2050 in it, and I'm gonna dig up something with less viscosity and hope to bring that oil pressure down, which isn't gonna hurt me anyway. So next step is gonna be draining the oil out of it and throwing some new juice in there, and that will come tomorrow because pizza's here. It's morning, and as I was engorged with bacon, onion, and olive pizza last night, I was lying awake in bed, and I decided to do something that is repugnant. I actually disapprove of it quite a bit, but I'm gonna do it. I am going to clean up the whole area, the back of the oil pan where it's leaking, brake clean it all out, and then I'm gonna cram a bunch of gasket sealer in there to try and slow down that one last weep of oil. We've done it on the dyno, it works, but it is, it's hack. So what I'm gonna do first is drain all the oil out of it, then clean it up, then glop the RTV, and then put new lower viscosity oil in it. Here goes. Oil is drained. Before I glop gasket sauce everywhere, I think I'm gonna use a hammer and punch on the lip of the oil pan right here. You know how an oil pan has those little reinforcing bumps in between bolt holes where there's two places here at the back that don't have that? And I'm gonna try and smash them up to put a little bit more pressure on the gasket. As I mentioned before, I ramrodded these bolts way harder than I ever normally would. And I can see that the metal's pooked out just a little bit. And so hopefully this fixes it a little bit. I don't know if that did anything. Let's do this part. Because I'm butchering, I might as well do it some more. not doing it on the spot with that little bump I described. Ooh, that felt pretty good. Okay. Now I'm going to clean it all up with the brake clean. The oil pan is all glopped. I'm gonna let that all dry before I put oil in it. The next step is to remove the exhaust system, and that will help me get at the transmission to pull it out to change the throwout bearing. Problem is, I wanna make sure that I have the exhaust gasket and the new throwout bearing before I start. Those are in here somewhere. I left them behind months ago when I did the engine swap initially on the 72 Road Runner. And so I am going to take all of this stuff out of the garage until I find those parts. And when I fail, I will just overnight new ones, because that's usually what happens. This is a lot of worthless stuff. Just old, used nothing. 41 Ford documents that I need to send to the guy I sold my 41 Ford to. Bone stock duster valve springs. 68 Coronet tail lights. Blankets. Gas can. It's all coming out. I just ransacked my garage for an hour and a half to find the new throwout bearing because I wanted to have it before I started taking this thing apart. Now, unfortunately, it wasn't even in the garage. It was in a storage unit down the street. So that was fun, but I have it. Next step is going to be dropping the exhaust system off the manifold on this side so that I can actually get at the transmission to pull it back for the throwout bearing. And sort of fortunately, by happenstance, it's that gasket between the pipe and the manifold, the donut there, which isn't really a donut, it's actually a gasket. That is the source of the ticking exhaust leak that is driving me insane. So I'll be able to fix two things at once. Let me get this junk apart. Good news, I got the exhaust gasket out. Better news, it's all in one piece because I don't have another one, so I can reuse this. Bad news, it doesn't appear to be the source of the leak. Usually you can see a witness mark of black soot having blown out around it somewhere. Now on the other side, my problem was that when you lined up the bolt holes, it didn't necessarily line up the hole, and a little edge of open pipe was hanging over the side. I don't think that was happening here. That'll take more investigation, but I'm gonna move on to taking the transmission out and worry about putting this back together later. Here's my situation. The throwout bearing is the thing that actually presses on the clutch fingers when you step on the clutch pedal in order to engage or release the clutch. And it's bad, and it's way up in the bell housing there, and the input shaft of the transmission goes all the way through it. That means I need to slide the transmission back by the length of the input shaft in order to be able to reach up in there and change the bearing. That gets a little difficult in this application because I've got extra junk in here. This is my Chrysler A833 4-speed 23 spline unit. Now the big deal here is that I have a gear vendor's overdrive. It's a little planetary gear set that gives you a 0.78 to 1 overdrive ratio. It's electronically activated. You just click it in and out. The problem is it adds roughly this much length to the whole drivetrain arrangement here. So I'm gonna have to remove the drive shaft and remove, I think, the speedo cable and the wiring and the shifter, and disconnect the transmission from the bell housing and try and slide the whole thing rearward, which is not gonna wanna balance very well because it's got so much weight here and here. So this is gonna be a trick with no lift. And I just got a big chunk of who knows what in my eyeball. So that's pretty awesome too. Eyeball. This is the moment. Drive shaft out, cross members out, shifters off, all the bolts between the bell housing and transmission are out. Pretty much everything, I think. And now I have to slide the transmission and the gear vendors back about that far in order to be able to get the, what do you call it, off? Throwout bearing. Oh, this is going to be no fun to get back together. Okay. Super scary. Okay, when it comes out of the throwout bearing, it's gonna fall. I just have to hope that it gets caught by the bell housing here. What I really need is 2 jacks, one on the gear vendor and one on this. Look at me with all the snap-on tools. When Motor Trend Productions folded up, I bought all the hand tools from the company. Never had snap-on before. It's a treat. Okay, I've got quite a bit of a problem here. I've got the transmission out this much. It needs to go back another 3 or 4 inches, and the gear vendors is hitting the torsion bar cross member. So the whole thing right now is not wanting to go back more. The engine is sitting on the drag link, so it's as low as it's gonna get. I can lower this a little bit. Okay. Can I get? Nope. Wow. This is no good. Especially on my back in my driveway. I got it back another 1/4 inch and it bottomed again. It is hard up against that cross member. This is bad. Wow. It just won't go quite far enough to get the throwout bearing out. Oh, it's still all the way in there. Wow, is this no good. And the gear vendor won't go lower because the exhaust system. I might have to undo the other side exhaust maybe. Oh, this is lousy. I think I have to do the exhaust system on the other side, unbolt it. Fortunately, I can probably do that from right here. The joys of doing stuff on the ground. All right, that was holding the whole engine up. That's cool. Torsion bars in my way. This is unbelievably sketchy, but it looks like I might get it. Maybe if this goes down just a hair. Okay. It's almost out of the bearing. This is so sketchy. What a fiasco. All because I forgot to change the throwout bearing. So the transmission and the gear vendors is completely just dangling on these jacks, being held in place by exhaust and shifter, and it's going to be a nightmare to get back together. How is this all cocked? Oh, it's on the exhaust. This is a total debacle. And it's getting dark. And this is ramrodding again. Can I get this whole thing further back? All right, it is so sketchy with the engine and trans and everything held up with jacks, but I got the throwout bearing out. Aha. How come it doesn't seem bad? Squeaks like crazy when it's in the car. I don't know if you remember in the original episode when I was taking this apart that the clutch fingers on the clutch that was in the car when I bought it were all worn out and hashed, and that is consistent with the surface of that bearing right there. So this is now doo-doo. And I will install my new one and then try and get this disaster all back together. Wow, that's gonna be fun. Complete boondoggle. As you can see, I have my movie light out now, and this is entirely sketchy. You can see the horror of it with the new light. I've got a jack holding the engine up. The input shaft of the transmission is just resting in the mouth of the bell housing, and there is a jack with a piece of wood that is barely holding up the gear vendor's unit. And so this is a perfect time for me to stick my hand up in here and try and make this throwout bearing happen with the super clippy thing. And mosquitoes are also eating me alive. I never have mosquitoes until I have to do something like this. Okay, throwout bearing. Please go to your home. Don't be too good for your home. There's one. Come on. Ah, got it. Kinda. All right. It's on. Ah, I can't move the transmission, which is in the way of that. Okay. Well, throwout bearing's on the fork. Now the reinstallation of the transmission begins. This is going to be a high cursing project. All right, now I've got the input shaft roughly lined up with the center of the crank and the throwout bearing and the clutch and all that stuff, and I need a way to carefully pull the transmission forward to re-engage all of that stuff. So I am going to use a ratchet strap. It might take 2 of them. And I'm gonna try and pull it up without pulling it off the jack stand. Hook that in the front of the cross member. Dirt in my mouth. Okay. So this is gonna want to pull it crooked, which is why I might need another one on the opposite side. And I need to watch to make sure it doesn't pull the gear vendors off of its jack. There. Okay, flashlight, looking up here, aiming the input shaft into the center of the clutch. This is working pretty good, except for the gear vendors really wants to fall off pretty bad. That wood wants to fall off. Okay, that's where it's stopping, so now it's not going in the back of the crank. Okay. But now it's dripping all over the driveway. Come on, come on. Oh, there. Okay. Now this is going to be in the way. This is cocked. I warned you this was going to be the no fun part, and I delivered. Ooh, I squared it up. That was awesome. That was really awesome. Oh, rats. Okay, let me go see what I did. Okay, this is amazing. I actually got it to go in. The input shaft of the trans is in the back of the crankshaft. I just need to rotate the trans that much to try and get a bolt in. Wow, I did it. Wow. That is awesome. Whew, hard part's done. I'm super stoked right now. I'm gonna get these bolts in and get the cross member in and call it a night and bang the rest of it together tomorrow. Wow, this is cool. I'm super happy. All right, that could have been much, much worse. I've got the engine in place, transmission bolted up, trans cross members holding everything together. I'm gonna do the rest of it tomorrow. But wow, I actually feel that was a win. Until tomorrow when I get it all bolted back together and for some reason the throwout bearing still makes noise, which would be normal for me. All right, good night. And now it's 7 p.m. the next day. I had a whole bunch of emails and other work to do, and so I'm starting late. But it's time to get under there and reassemble everything that I disassembled in order to get the trans and the gear benders out. I decided to bang in a new polyurethane transmission mount while I was here. Everything is buttoned up from the bell housing all the way back to the rear U-joint. Now I move on to my arch nemesis, the exhaust system. Hopefully I'm done crawling on my back underneath the car. Now I'm ready to put in that lower viscosity oil that I told you about to try and reduce the oil pressure on this thing, because as a reminder, it pegs the oil pressure gauge when I fire it up cold with 2050 in it. So I've got some Lucas 1030 here. I'm noticing that this is not a Lucas zinc oil, and I really want zinc in the oil because of the flat tappet camshaft that I've got in this. So I'm not gonna end up running this very long. I'll probably run it for a while and change it right away. And I'm not gonna change the filter, so it's still got some 2050 in that is zinc loaded. So hopefully I'll be all right. I'm just gonna put 4 in the pan, and we're gonna fire it up and see if I am victorious. I'm gonna be victorious. Now's when we find out if I'm gonna be doing all of this the 3rd time. Will the throwout bearing squeak? Will the exhaust leak? Will the oil leak? Here it comes. I'm in neutral. No exhaust leak. Oil pressure is still up at 80 right now. So will the oil leak? Wow, oil pressure is pegged right now. Even with the 1030, it might come down once it's warm. 440. Okay, I have an exhaust leak. I'm gonna crawl under and feel around that donut to see if it's there, but it's probably the manifold or the exhaust crossover. I don't feel it at the exhaust crossover. I do see rat poop on my intake manifold, which I've never had here at the house before, so that's not cool. Neither is the exhaust leak. There's no oil leak yet, and I can't feel exhaust around that donut. Let me go get a tube and I'm gonna listen. Right there. All right, it's the center of the exhaust manifold. It's not the donut. Yep. Here's what I just did. I put this tube to my ear and I listened at all the places where you could have an exhaust leak. And it's not at that head pipe connection at all. It's at the exhaust manifold. So next job is changing the exhaust manifold gasket. What a bummer. Ooh, before I shut it off for the exhaust, I forgot that I need to check the throwout bearing. It's not squealing right now. Let me step on it. Ah, silence. Fantastic. I'm gonna go under one more time and have a look at the rear main seal leak and see if I fix that. And no leak. The power of glopping silicone and ramrodding the thing. I actually think it was that vertical seam in the rear main seal retainer, and I glopped enough on there that right now it's okay. So 2 victories, throwout bearing and oil leak. And actually, I didn't fail on the head pipe gasket, but the exhaust manifold's a fail. Trying to decide if I'm just gonna drive this thing anyway, because I don't feel like fixing it right now. I feel completely defeated. When I first fired it up, I was so hopeful. I stuck my head underneath the thing and it didn't look like it had an oil leak. It does. It very clearly is running down from that vertical seam in the retainer for the rear main seal. And of course, I thought at first it didn't have an exhaust leak. That was also delusion. It has a pretty big exhaust leak. Throwout bearing seems to be fixed. At this point, I don't know. I do not want to pull the pan off and try and change the rear main seal in the car. It's probably what I should do. But instead, I think I'm gonna glop it more. Try and get the glop farther up, because the leak is coming from above where I put the glop before. I might even try a bottle of rear main seal stop leak. You know, one of the things about these 440s is that often the align bore is wrong and the crank doesn't align concentrically with the hole in the rear main seal housing. And so sometimes it's moved over a bit. When that happens though, it leaks at the regular round rear main seal, not at those verticals. So, I don't know. You know how this is right now, right? This has happened to you. It's not just me. I do not want to pull the 440 back out of the car. I do not want to drop the pan in the car. Okay, I was pretty depressed back there. I still am, but I'm pretending not to be because that's the way to get things done. I know the right thing to do here, and that would be drop the oil pan, take that retainer out there for the rear main seal, and try and fix it. That's not what I'm going to do. What I'm going to do is brake clean all up in there, get all the oil off that I can, and go even harder and higher on that vertical split where the rear main seal retainer touches the block. There's like a V-shaped groove in it, and I'm just gonna pack that even more full of RTV. You might as well try, you know? I may even pour in some rear main seal fixer because that side seal, maybe it swells up and fixes itself. It's delusion. All I'm really doing here is delaying the inevitable, but hey, it makes content, right? I am not getting it right, but my hope is that I get it running without leaking. I'm pretty sure it's not the actual rear main seal leaking. Ooh, that found a good cut. Ow. I'm pretty sure it's not the actual rear main seal leaking because it's just dripping right down that crack. I don't know. See if I can feel any oil. Yep, still oil. Whoo, every cut. That's a lot. All right, let the gooping begin. Okay, there it is. Wow, I'm making a mess up in there. This is so hack. So hack. I am just packing this in there. I am not proud of this at all. Okay, that's as good as it's gonna get. I am not the least bit proud of my actions on that oil leak down there, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do to prevent pulling the 440 back out of the Road Runner. And now I'm gonna suffer from more delusion here by attempting to just tighten this exhaust manifold to see if it fixes the exhaust leak. You know this isn't gonna work, right? You know it's the gasket or a warped manifold or something of the sort. I need a much shorter doohickey. Well, that side manifold took a pretty good cinching, so I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. Little bit of a cinch. The problem here is that it's got studs in the cylinder head, and if you completely ramrod them, I'm almost sure to break them off. All right, exhaust manifolds are cinched. Now, the problem with all of this is I don't want to fire it up to test the exhaust leak because that black goop is still drying on the rear main seal. I need to leave it for at least a few hours, so I'll see you this evening. Now it's actually 4 days later because I had to go out to roadkill nights. However, I admit that before I left, off camera, I fired up the engine to find out about the oil leak and the exhaust leak. And the oil leak is gloriously fixed with all of that glop in there. So if it works, it isn't stupid, right? I'm still ashamed of it, but at least the car is functional without me having to do a whole lot of work. Now the exhaust leak, that's a different thing. The manifold leaks really, really badly. And the worst news about that is that to get the manifold off, I have to drop the steering column, perhaps even pull it out, because the column is right in the way of one of the giant long nuts that the 440 exhaust manifold uses. And it looks like probably the manifold won't come off the studs unless the column's out of the way. So that's my next job. And I don't wanna, but I'm gonna. I've got the exhaust manifold most of the way off the studs, but because the studs are so long, I can't clear the steering column. Here's the column, here's the manifold. It's just hitting so that I can't pull it off. That means I'm gonna have to take the whole steering column out of the car. I've already dropped it down, but now I'm gonna knock the roll pin out of the coupler to the steering box and then pull the column out so that I can get the manifold out. This is fun. And I can definitely see the witness mark where it was leaking really badly, so at least I'm addressing the correct problem. Here's a little trick. I got under there, and with the punch in place to knock out the roll pin in the steering column, I couldn't get a swing on the hammer, so I need an extension. What I'm doing is taking the smallest socket that slips over that punch and putting it on these extensions and shoving it in there, and now I can whack the hammer right there. Simple, but in case you hadn't thought of it, that's a cool tip. And out. After getting the steering column out of the way, I got the manifold off, and now's when I do some inspection to figure out the exhaust leak. First, I've got the gasket right here, and I don't see as much carbon tracking, black soot flame out as I was hoping to. I do see a little bit of the gasket missing right here. It is stuck to the head, and you can see on the head where fumes have been coming out and blackening the paint around the port. Now, The other thing I'm looking at here is I can see the witness mark of the impression of the manifold on the gasket. And what that tells me is that I'm making full contact, that I don't have part of the port that's uncovered or anything, that it is sealing the gasket all the way around. So that's good. Now, the other thing though is look at the manifold. I'm looking at this exhaust manifold and it is sooty, not at all sooty, sooty. So is that cylinder not firing, or is that something going on with the fact that the exhaust leaks so bad that it's drawing oxygen back in through there? I don't know. It doesn't run like it's only on 7 cylinders, like that cylinder's completely dead, but something's going on there and there are no coincidences. So I need to track that down and figure out what's going on once I get this running again. But first, I need to get it all back together. I've scraped most of the gasket off of the manifold and I'm still inspecting as I go. And the worst thing I've discovered is that it seems like this thing was corroded at one point. It's cast iron, it would rust. It looks like it's been sandblasted, but it's a little bit thin and a little bit bumpy right here where the leak was. I would want this wall thickness here to be better. And you can tell on this port particularly that some of it is rotted away. So that is a big bummer. The other thing is you never know if an iron exhaust manifold surface is completely flat, and it needs to be. And so I'm going to use a file and make it as flat as I can. It's also a good idea to take a straight edge and put it across there and see if you can find any low spots. You can actually take it to a machine shop and have it milled flat. You could also belt sand it in some cases, but that can be a little bit sketchy. And the file's not the greatest, but it's what I'm gonna do. So let's find out if I can make this thing pretty good. And as you're filing, it'll really show you the high points and low points. It's a perfectly flat file. You can find out if it's gonna cut flat or if there's going to be big dips. This appears to be low right here. See how it's not filing right there? That is a low spot where it's got corrosion. Here are the results of filing the manifold. I think I made it better, but you can really tell by looking at the pattern on here that this has been corroded. It's got a lot of pitting in it. And not only can you see that, but you can feel it. The surface is just a little bit rough. You can see a big low point right here on this port. And the one that was leaking, if I take and put the file on here and use it as a straight edge. I can't really show it on camera because it's so sort of fine, but you can tell that there is a low spot right there of a tiny, tiny bit, you know, 2 or 3 thou or something like that. That would be a good candidate to have it milled, but I'm not gonna take the time or spend the money to do that because if it leaks again, I'm willing to take it apart and try and fix it again. The ultimate answer here would be putting headers on the car, but that's expensive. The headers that I like that fit this are TTIs, and they would be like $1,100. Then I'd also need an exhaust system. So we're gonna go with what we've got here. Now I'm gonna clean off the cylinder head and then find out if I have a gasket and if it's the gasket that I like. I played the game, does Freiburger's gasket stack have what I need? And I won. There's a couple of exhaust manifold gaskets. The problem is they're exactly the same as the ones that came off. So I'm gonna carefully inspect the fit on the manifold and decide if that's really what I wanna use again. It doesn't seem to make sense to just reinstall the same thing, does it? And see, the thing is, this is so thin, you would like it to have a bigger bite. See how fat this is? So that's a good seal. This is much thinner. Not loving that. Well, now I apologize if you hear the gardeners next door. They're weed whacking and mowing and vacuuming and whatever. Meanwhile, I have been soul searching about what I'm gonna do to seal the exhaust manifold to the cylinder head. My problem is that the gasket that I have is identical to the gasket that blew out. So the only thing that would change is the fact that I've filed this a little bit, and I don't trust that. I could get a different type of gasket, but this is what's available at your typical parts store, and I've never tried to use a Fel-Pro high performance header gasket on a manifold. So I'm just not gonna go that way. You know, from the factory, I am perhaps a 90% sure that they did not use a gasket here at all. Now, clearly this is not flat enough to pull that off again. I can bolt it on with no gasket, but I think I'm gonna do something that I haven't done in years and perhaps even decades. I am gonna use sealer on this flange. Now, I noticed when I ran out to the parts store that you can still get the Permatex Ultra Copper, which is what I have used in the distant past. You can also get this new Optimum stuff, and it goes to 750 degrees instead of 700, and it claims easy disassembly. That's a big perk for me because what do you bet I'm taking this apart once again? I'm gonna give it a shot with this new sauce. It's extremely unlikely for me to use something like this. I just never do it, but I figure better living through chemicals. It worked on my oil leak. I'm gonna give it a shot on the exhaust. The instructions say you're supposed to put a bead on there, tighten it just loosely, finger tight the nuts, wait for an hour for it to dry, and then tighten it on up. So that's what's about to happen. I gooped up the exhaust manifold, I installed it, just sort of finger tight, just until the goop pooked out of there. And now I'm gonna cinch it back up, as per the instructions, after having waited an hour for it to dry when it was just a little bit loose. The other thing about the goop is that it was much more stringy than regular gasket material like ultra black or ultra gray. It was a little bit more plasticky, I guess. It was harder to smoothly spread. Kind of interesting stuff. I hope it works. It's now 24 hours later. I've been remarkably obedient. The package for that special exhaust sealing sauce said, let it dry 24 hours after bolting it all up. And I have. So I've given this every opportunity to work. I don't expect it to, but it should. Let's fire it up and find out if I'm gonna be absolutely devastated and screaming in agony, or if this is gonna be the moment where the Road Runner actually becomes a vehicle again. Because I cannot stand a car with an exhaust leak. It makes the whole thing seem cheap and terrible. I hate it. The worst beater in the world is okay to me as long as it doesn't have an exhaust leak. Here goes. I don't think it does, but that was a little weird. Ah, no leak. Totally fixed. Yes. But what's that other noise? Last step, I'm gonna put the steering column back together and then I am out driving the Road Runner. am out road testing my garbage. So let's review. Throwout bearing, flawless. No noise from that bearing at all. So that was a big win. Exhaust leak, not making any noise at all. You know, I didn't want to trust that exhaust sauce in a bottle in a squeeze tube, but I have to say, I followed the directions exactly. I did it carefully, and it worked. We'll find out if it'll blow out later, but so far it hasn't. And speaking of that, I'm gonna have to romp on this thing a little bit, because then there's also testing that big oil leak. When you go up to RPM, you get some crankcase pressure, and that can blow out oil leaks that you don't otherwise have free revving the thing in the driveway, as I did. And so I'm now in a spot where I can romp on this a little bit and find out if I also fix that oil leak. Plus give you a little bit of road test info on the Road Runner. I can tell you already, one of the things I really can't stand about this car is the exhaust system. It's just not well done. It hits the Z-bar, it hits the torsion bar, I think it hits the rear axle somewhere. It just needs to be redone. But it is 2.5-inch Flowmasters, and it sounds pretty good for a gutless 440. I think I know the answer on this 440, but I'm gonna tell you in a minute once I actually get it to wide open throttle. Yes, I was right. It is completely gutless. So this is a 1975 Ram Charger 440, and it seems to be rebuilt, because I looked at the underside of the pistons when I had the pan off, and it looks like they're hyper-eutectic KBs or something like that. So I don't know the compression ratio. Hopefully it's better than the 7.5 to 1 that they put in motorhomes back then. And I do know that it has a little tiny camshaft in it, and a Performer intake and stock exhaust manifolds. Here's what I know. When we were testing 440s on Engine Masters, we would take a 7.5 to 1 horrible smog era unit and give it a 236 at 50 cam and a Performer RPM intake and some headers, and it would make somewhere between 330 and 350 horsepower, depending on how trashed it was. And I think they would make around 440 pound-feet of torque, maybe a little bit less because the compression is so bad. But this is going to be worse than that, because the cam's smaller and the intake is not as high-po, and it's got exhaust manifolds. So let's be honest, this thing makes 300 horsepower. It's kind of embarrassing, but it's fun to drive with the 4-speed, especially now that stuff is theoretically fixed. All right, now I need to go home, look underneath the car, and discover if it's got an oil leak. I've also got a GoPro going under there, so we will know what's going on. Well, it took me a full day to be able to sit here and be rational, because yes, the Road Runner still gushes oil out of the rear main seal. It's terrible. It doesn't leak at low RPM or free revving it, but man, when you're on it and you got some load and some crankcase pressure, that GoPro that I had on the underside showed that it is just fogging the underside of the car. And that is super, super enraging to me. It really caused me to sit down and have some deep thoughts about it, to tell you the truth. And here's sort of what I came up with. You know, I know that many of you are thinking right now that I've got this catchphrase, you know, don't get it right, just get it running. And in this case, I didn't get it right just by glopping RTV everywhere. And it's not running in the sense that it's not drivable because it leaks oil so badly. But what did it really cost me other than time? If it had worked, I would be sitting here in absolute glory right now. Instead, I have to recall a philosophy that my mother gave me doing homework as I was growing up. And that is, to do it wrong takes twice as long. I wanted to throttle her when she came up with that. It was so irritating, but ultimately it has been true, especially in this case. It's gonna take me twice as long, but the resolution is the same as it would have been either way. I have to pull the engine out of the Road Runner. Now, I'm pretty sure it's a rear main seal problem, and the reasons for that could be they put the seal in backwards, those vertical end seals didn't swell the right way, they didn't get RTV in the right place, or this 440 has that problem with the lack of concentricity from the crankshaft to the rear main seal. To fix that, I estimate that the solution is to use a rope seal, the old style from the 50s, and they sell a modern graphite impregnated rope that you can use on these engines, and it tends to work better if you've got that line bore problem. It tends to just take up more space and be able to seal an irregular shape a little bit better. And you can lie under the car, you can get the oil pan off, you can drop the crank a little bit, and you can make that change. As a matter of fact, on this Jeep right here, on its AMC 360, you saw me do that in an episode. I did exactly that, but it was a lip seal. I was able to roll it around and get it fixed, and it doesn't leak anymore. On the Mopar with a rope seal, I don't think that's happening. I've got to take the engine out. And here's where the philosophy just gets big. Because if I take this 440 out of this car again, and I hate redoing work, and I take the engine all apart just to fix that rear seal, am I really going to want to put it back together all gutless? Am I going to want to put pistons in it and a bigger camshaft and different intake manifold, maybe even some aluminum heads? Probably. But do I want to spend that time and money on this car? Maybe not. I really would rather be working on my yellow Super Bee barn find, or my 69 Hemi Belvedere, or even my red Duster, the 364 speed car. The thing about all those cars is that they kind of serve the same purpose to me. They're all cool muscle cars with 4 speeds that you can just drive around, which has always been my dream as a kid, and it still is. The thing is, this Road Runner is probably my least favorite of them, because it has really nice paint and interior. As a matter of fact, I was going to get it cut and buff next week. But I don't like taking care of paint and interior. I like beaters better. And the grass is greener over there on the other side of those 3 other cars that I haven't worked on for a little bit. And I'm kind of sick of this one because I hate doing work twice. I don't want to pull the 440 again. So the question is, what am I going to do here? Am I going to kick this to the curb for a while and just start working on other stuff? Yes, absolutely. Am I going to let it sit in a warehouse and forget about it? Am I going to sell it, which is going to be really hard to do with that gushing oil leak? Or will I do what I know in my heart is the right thing and just persevere and get over it and pull the 440 back out and fix that oil leak once and for all without spending a ton of money? I know it's the right thing to do. I'm not positive yet if it's what I will do, because I'm still sort of in the depths of depression over the fact that I'm going to have to do that. 2 good bits of news here, though. First of all, I learned about that Permatex exhaust goop. I didn't know if I was going to trust it, but it seems to work, so that might be a solution in the future. You should check it out. And by the way, no paid advertising there. It's just whatever I bought at the store. Second thing, do you remember when I was looking at the exhaust manifold and it looked like there was one hole that wasn't firing? It wasn't all sooty like the rest of them? It doesn't seem that the thing is running on 7. The spark plug doesn't show it, driving around doesn't show it. And how would the exhaust blow out right there if that cylinder wasn't firing? It's gotta be that it was drawing oxygen in out of that hole. I remember a long time ago, Mopar racer Dick Landy taught me that if your car pops on D-cell, it's because it has an exhaust leak and it's pulling the exhaust through, it's pulling oxygen through on D-cell and combusting whatever fuel is left in the system. Anyway, 2 good things out of this whole mess. Oh, and I did fix the throwout bearing, even though that's going to have to come back apart if I took the engine back out. Whatever the outcome, I'm pretty sure that you'll find out about it on future episodes on the David Freiburger channel. Do me a favor, buy my merch, share the channel, and I'll see you next time.